Names can be a pretty difficult thing to come up with. You sat down and meticulously crafted your character's face and proportions, and all you could come up with was Bob? I don't blame you. I always struggle for hours anytime I need to come up with a new name for anything. Oftentimes, I just go with the first thing that comes to mind. That's how we ended up with a Switch named Steve Smith. Coming up with a name for your own character that nobody else will ever see is one thing, but having to come up with an entire catalog of names for many different characters in an entire video game is something else entirely. In the Pokemon world, NPC names are mostly based off of the real-world names we're all familiar with. Youngster Joey, Lastana, Pokemaniac Brent. Your adventure is nothing without the different kinds of characters you encounter, and Pokemon trainers are the most ubiquitous types of NPCs you will meet in battle. The Pokemon world, in concept, was initially supposed to be analogous to the real world. That is, Pokemon Red and Blue truly taking place in the Kanto region of Japan, its actual inspiration. There used to be references to real-world countries like India and China originally, and Lieutenant Surge used to be known as the Lightning American. There was also a reference to Russia in the Generation 1 games in their respective remakes, where a Silphco scientist grumbles about how his boss shouldn't have sent him off to the Tixie branch, located in Russian no man's land. However, as the series started becoming more globalized, Game Freak stopped referencing the names of any real-world countries in order to create a more cohesive original Pokemon world. But one thing that carried over from the real world, as one would expect, are people's names, since coming up with completely original names that derive from absolutely nothing in our real world can be pretty challenging. They could take weeks, months to come up with a whole new naming convention. That's why the Pokemon world is filled with people who share the same names we all have. However, there's a Pokemon game out there, two in fact, that took on the monumental task of using completely original names in a brand new Pokemon region, where you'll do battle against trainers named Coit, Gressley, and Faultly? Feeply? E-roll, wait, is that Biden? What the hell? Today, I want to take a quick look at the strange naming conventions of the characters of Pokemon Coliseum and Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. Ah, the GameCube. This neat little cube is one of my favorite consoles ever released. I was obsessed with this cube as a kid that was slowly being shaped by the bizarre advertising campaigns of the early 2000s. This console is home to two of the most unique and more iconic spin-offs in the Pokemon franchise, although calling them a spin-off really doesn't do them any justice. These two games were full-fledged RPG adventures throughout the brand new Ore region, a region that's based off of Arizona and other surrounding locations in the desert. In this region, the crime syndicate Cypher is transforming Pokemon into corrupted shadow Pokemon, closing off their hearts and allowing them to become stronger, more violent Pokemon in order to control the region and take over the world. You know, the typical stuff with these Pokevillains. With the help of Team Snag'em, another crime organization that steals Pokemon from trainers by capturing them with the Snag Machine, these two work in unison to strike terror into Ori's citizens. In this barren, desertic region where wild Pokemon can't even survive in, many of the trainers you'll encounter, besides enemies, have been molded by the rough environment and have taken to becoming hunters, chasers, and riders. You know, cool-sounding words back in 2004. It really is a cool setting, and I wish Game Freak would do something ambitious like this again. With the setting taking place in a gritty, fictitious, and semi-dystopian version of Arizona, you'd expect the people you encounter to have Latino and American names, like Carlos or Jason. But instead, you're battling against trainers named Cool Trainer Dibson and Chaser Labette. Or you're being stopped by Cypher peons named Ertlig and Morbid. Yeah, it's safe to say that most of these names are complete gibberish. At first I thought that the Japanese version of the game had regular names that made sense, and they were just localized in this, way. But even in the Japanese version, they have weird-ass names. If you thought Coit was weird, well, Rellers isn't much better now, is it? Come on, man, I'm supposed to take this dude seriously since he's a boss and all, but why is his fucking name Snabble? And Eggrog? There's a lot of stupid food names. E-roll? Egg roll? It kinda reminds me of the randomly generated phrases that the trainers in the Battle Frontier in Pokemon Emerald would say. Some of these phrases are flat out absurd and feel really out of place in a Pokemon game. But there's a reason behind this madness. There are 300 different trainers to battle in Emerald's Battle Frontier, and being a third version to Ruby and Sapphire, they likely didn't want to spend too much effort writing unique dialogue for every single trainer. So they used the Easy Chat system to generate sentences of up to 6 preset words. But in this case, people sat down and insisted that Sogol was an appropriate name for this man. In pretty much all other Pokemon games, in both Japanese and English at least, every NPC has a real-life name. But somehow Coliseum and XD decided to make a hard right on Saratoga and get crazy with this strange naming convention. These two games, however, weren't developed by Game Freak, but instead by Japanese game development studio Genius Sonority, a studio of industry veterans who had worked on Dragon Quest in the past, but had very little experience playing Pokemon. A company that was initially founded with the intent of developing Pokemon games for home consoles, the first game they ever made was Pokemon Coliseum, and later Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. Both games were localized and translated into English by Nob Ogasawara, who also localized and translated every mainline Pokemon game up to Pokemon Platinum into English. He's pretty well known among Pokemon super nerds for including references to various songs, movies, and other things. Assumedly, he was responsible for checking these names out in Japanese, and then appropriately translating and localizing them into our Western eyes. So, why did he name this trainer Fuddler? I don't know, ask Chaser Fergie. This guy's name is just straight up Mopar. Maybe Nob's a fan of Mopar. I don't even know what Mopar is. Some stupid car shit or something. Oeef? I just made that name up. I literally just found my keyboard real quick and that came out. I bet he had a great time naming all these edgy, rebellious characters stupid shit like Lonin and Gressley. It's not like the names in the Japanese version didn't sound bizarre though. Working off of names like Timon, Carbon, and Collard, it makes sense that he wanted to keep things consistent by naming them Haben, Carbon, and Jamie. Huh, that's odd. A normal name? In my GameCube Pokemon game? I guess there are some people with normal names. Like Professor Crane, the professor of the Pokemon HQ lab. The protagonist's mother and sister are both named Lily and Jovi. Even the protagonist's own canon name is Michael, something so innocuous and biblical. Coliseum's protagonist is named Wes, but his partner Rui does have a more unusual name. But it at least still sounds like a decent name, unlike Bopen. But that all goes out the window when the main villain's names are revealed to you. XD's main villain, Greevil. Get it? He's evil. His son's names Ardos and Eldis actually kinda sound cool though. And I actually really like Lovrina's name a lot. It's one of the few names that suits the character behind it. But then you meet Cypher Admin Snaddle. God, I fucking hate that guy.
You're ugly, you're disgusting, I'm gonna kill you, give me $200.
And Gonzap. Gonzap? Ugh. From pretty much the only Pokemon Coliseum interview that exists out there, the developers wanted to create a Pokemon experience that had never been done before, something to break from the traditional setting that had been established. The whole concept of shadow Pokemon and purification, the juxtaposition of a dry, rusty world and colorful, vibrant Pokemon, and an overall redirection of the cut-and-dry Pokemon RPG into a more narrative-based traditional RPG experience like the ones found on PS1, is something that Game Freak never wants to do again. Which is a shame. I replayed Pokemon XD this year, and after all these years of playing new Pokemon games and watching these types of side games quickly fade away in favor of the former, everything about these games breathe fresh life into my perspective of the series, and reminds me of why I developed a crazed obsession with it. These games fuck, and if anyone tries to tell you otherwise, I'll send Bodybuilder Dobby after them.